Morning, gentlemen. Today we will review a book written by Dr. Sashi Tharoor, Why Am I a Hindu? Now, we all know we are Hindus not because our ancestors called themselves Hindus, but because people on the west of River Sindhu called those who lived on the east of Sindhu as Hindus. And hence we came to be known as Hindus. Now, every rational human being, whenever we attend lectures or we do anything ourselves, we ask this question: what is in it for me? हमारे लिए इसमें क्या है? So this question must arise: why I am a Hindu? What does this belief give me? Who were those Hindus जो बरसों पहले एंशिएंट इंडिया में रहते थे और जिनको वेस्ट साइड के लोग सिंधु नदी के वो हिंदू बुलाते थे? Is it just for the sake of identity that I am a Hindu? What is so peculiar in Hinduism that has kept it going for thousands of years despite having lost the political freedom? Is Hinduism only about Hanuman Chalisa, Aartis, rituals, Ramchandra ji, Sita ji, Hanuman ji, Ganesh ji, Shiv ji, Parvati ji? Or there is something deeper than this? All these questions we must ask. जब हम इस आदत में हैं, we are in a habit to ask what is in it for me. Now, in that sense, this book by Mr. Sashi Tharoor is a reasonably good book to read and to be proud of what we believe in. Now, this book is particularly good for those who have not read Gita, Upanishads, Vedant, even once. कभी पढ़ा ही नहीं, और अगर पढ़ा भी है तो they have done it so like a parrot, without understanding anything. So this book will help them to know the salient aspects of Vedas, Upanishads, Vedanta, etc. Secondly, उनके लिए भी बहुत बढ़िया, who have never critically examined their own faith, very essential for the growth of any religious belief. Otherwise it stagnates. Thirdly, उन लोगों के लिए बहुत बढ़िया है whose opinions are based on perception and not on judgment and analytical study. Their views have been formed on the basis of what they have either heard or what they have read on WhatsApp. It's always better to have your views formed on the basis of learning. It's always better to read Vedas and then say वेदाओं में ज्ञान, वेद जो है ज्ञान का भंडार है, ना कि बगैर पढ़े लिखे बोल देना. So such people must read this book, and along with that they must read this book by Dr. Ambedkar, who are Shudras. आपको बहुत कुछ अपने धर्म के बारे में पता लगेगा. So I strongly suggest that one must read this book. Now we move on to the contents. This book is of just 300 pages, so not very thick, readable. It has 3 sections divided into various chapters. The section 1 deals with my Hinduism, the section 2 deals with political Hinduism, and section 3 taking back Hinduism. The flow is logical, and by the time you reach midway of section 2, one starts realizing the purpose of this book. To understand that purpose, let's begin with how he section 1. In section 1, he discusses about the environment in which he was at home, in which he was brought up. His father was a devout Hindu and who believed in acceptance, like Swami Vivekananda, who professed that world needs to move from tolerance to acceptance. Thereafter, he emphasizes that unlike Bible or Quran, Hinduism as a faith does not have one prescription. Here an individual is free to find a path for himself to realize and experience God through inquiry. And he quotes that famous Nasidya Sukta, ऋग्वेद का, जिसमें सृष्टि के बारे में एक हिम है जिसको कहा जाता है क्रिएशन हिम. Who really knows and who can say? ये किसके बारे में बात कर रहे हैं? ये सृष्टि के बारे में. Who really knows and who can say whence it all come and how did creation happen? The gods themselves are later than creation, so who knows truly whence this great creation sprang? Who knows whence this creation had its origin? He, whether he fashioned it or whether he did not. वो व्यक्ति जिसने ये सूक्त लिखा है वो क्वेश्चन कर रहा है क्रिएटर को ही, उसको डाउट है ही वेदर ही फैशनड इट और वेदर ही डिड नॉट, ही हु सर्वेज इट ऑल फ्रॉम द हाईएस्ट हेवन, ही नोज और मे बी इवन ही डज नॉट नो. Imagine this was written thousands of years back in Rig Veda, which is considered as the oldest scripture ever written by the human being. Thus, if Vedas are the first scriptures that Hindus wrote, rather the mankind wrote, and still revere it, then we must accept that Hinduism allows inquiry and freedom to question even the God, even the Creator. Even if when we read Gita, we will find that Gita, Vedanta are not one-way traffic. Arjuna asked numerous questions. And hence, finally, Dr. Tharoor says he is a Hindu because it is intellectual fit, as it allows freedom to think, to question and to inquire. It does not ask you, the Hinduism does not ask you to behave like a typical horse that drives a cart who is supposed to be only looking straight, side में उसके वो eyes cover कर देते हैं. So Hinduism is all about freedom to think, freedom to question and to inquire. Thereafter he discusses about why so many gods and deities, and also then discusses about the scriptures which have been classified as Shrutis, Smritis, Itihas, Puranas, Agmas, Darshans, and explain their purpose, significance, and how they have gradually come about, originated. For instance, Vedas talked of formless God, imageless God, and conduct of ritual through hymns. Puranas emphasized on worship of gods in human form and pujas. He discusses briefly about the six darshanas or six principal schools of thought, including the philosophy of Vedanta, which rejected non-dualism. So finally, Hinduism is all about self-realization, which ultimately leads to merging one's soul into collective Brahma. Now, a critical study is never complete unless you go through examine the grey areas also. So he has discussed about casteism, and he also discusses Purush Sukta, which was discussed mentioned in Dr. Ambedkar's book also, Who Are Shudras. I once again emphasize, one should read this book by Dr. Ambedkar to understand these, Hinduism as a faith also. And this book will really help Who Are Shudras. And then Mr. Tharoor talks of, share some experiences of some Kerala temples where untouchables were not allowed. Then finally he discusses about that, controversial point, the godmen and gurus and swamis and god market and why they have flourished. He says that the hold that godmen have over people is not a function of religious devotion, rather it has a lot to do with a sense of drift in the Indian society. And here he talks about various Babas. He discusses, then he talks about Hindu fatalism and highlights that if American carries a credit card, Hindu carries a horoscope. And in that he quotes, when his boss, he mentions this, when his boss asked him once about Hindu fatalism, he said, in Christianity, a body has a soul, but in Hinduism, it's the soul that has a body. Understood the difference? You got to sit and think about it. Thereafter, he discussed about the great Hindu sages and personalities who have made contributions in the development of Hindu faith. Adi Shankaracharya, Ramanuj, Kabir, Laleshwari of Kashmir, Surdas Ji, Tulsidas Ji, Basava, who created a separate sect, Lingayat in Karnataka, who had questioned the caste system and once remarked, loaded with the burden of Vedas, the Brahman is a veritable donkey. He talks about Sikhism, Rajaram Mohan Roy, Swami Vivekanand, Gandhi Ji, Dr. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Ambedkar. And he says, Dr. Tharoor says, that the difference in Dr. Ambedkar and Gandhiji was Dr. Ambedkar denounced the Hinduism's distortions and cruelties and eventually left the faith, whereas Gandhiji always tried to change from within. Then further in section 2, he discussed about Hinduism and politics. Now, although every religion has had an influence on politics of the erstwhile kingdoms and nations also, even after the world has coined this word secularism, which basically implies non-indulgence of a state in religion, but religion has always had an influence. We can argue about the degree as such. So in that sense, Hinduism also is not untouched by this malaise. Now, a famous anthropologist, Dr. Tharoor, quotes Mr. Madan, who wrote that that increasing secularization of modern Indian life is responsible for the rise of fundamentalism, since marginalization of faith permits perversion of religion. So implication of this is that secularism has deprived Indians of their moral underpinnings. Now here, in order to bring back that morality, that Hinduness, come into play what? Savarkar, Govalkar, Deen Dayal Upadhyay, RSS, etc., whose politics have always revolved around the use of religion, and they are discussed here. He highlights, Dr. Tharoor highlights through old articles written by these gentlemen as to how they eulogized Hitler and Nazis and even defined nationhood on the same lines as Nazis did. He also highlights as to how cows, artis have been used or misused by Sangh Parivar for political power right from its inception to win over the Hindus. Now, this book could have been much better had he in subsequent chapters discussed as to how and why the Sangh Parivar and Hindutva have succeeded in a country where they have been marginalized for years, for almost 70 years. Even in 40s, if we go back, when the country's communal environment was at its worst, and even after post-independence when country was reeling in poverty and deprivation, they were always marginalized. They were nowhere. They were on the fringes. So, forces of Hindutva have not risen on their own. Something has allowed them to rise, and that is also without any dilution. He should have highlighted this fact, what allowed them to succeed. And he has therefore conveniently glossed over misgovernance, terrorism, law and order problem which frustrated a common man, a secular Hindu, as he started feeling secularism as a burden. He did not mention that we allowed terrorism to grow by treating fundamentalists with kid gloves. If the current government can ensure that for last 7 years there has not been a single terror attack south of Pathankot, then the question arises why the same could not be achieved by them when they were ruling. Dr. Tharoor's party was ruling. So when people get frustrated, religion is the recourse, and this is what had happened in Punjab and Kashmir. The lack of deft handling of Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism gave enough reason to people to look towards those who had been for years espousing the cause of Hindus. He should have made a mention of this great lapse before recommending a medicine. Now his concern is genuine. What can be done when Hinduism has been Islamicized by Sangh Parivar? And here also he once again recommends the same medicine that a Hindu is now fed up of listening to: become tolerant, holistic, just, and follow pluralistic dharma as articulated by Swami Vivekananda. It's pointless now to find faults with Deen Dayal Upadhyay, Govalkar and Savarkar and decrying Hindutva, because his own party has been instrumental in compelling the secular Hindu to look towards Savarkarism. It was their inapt handling of Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic terrorism, poor governance and poor law and order situation that compelled Hindus to look towards Savarkar and his ilk to find a solution to their problem. While recommending the solution, he could have used this opportunity to highlight as to how religion in Pakistan has ruined all its institutions over a period of 70 years. The same may befall on India in foreseeable future. It would be good for the readers to read this book. Again, I am recommending Dr. Ambedkar's book, Who Are Shudras, in which he has demonized Brahminical cult. It is perhaps then one would realize whether temples, cow politics can re-energize the nation or once again take us back to medievalism and breaking point. This is short. What in Dr. Ambedkar's book, Who Are Shudras, and after reading that book, it encouraged me to buy this one, Why Am I a Hindu? Okay, so although it makes a common man know about the core tenets of Hinduism, this book, Dr. Tharoor's book, but it fails to give a direction as to where Islamicization of Hinduism will take us. But if one reads Dr. Ambedkar's book, Who Are Shudras, or many other books, one can connect the link missed out by Tharoor. Where will all this lead us to? Okay, gentlemen, thank you. Jai Hind.